most of the people in some of these villages have been evacuated either to Bethel or to Anchorage, or they've gone to stay with family or friends in other towns across the West Coast. Still many, though, here in Anchorage. They did receive about 600 people into the Anchorage area. You can just, as I said, see some of the damage that was done out in these villages and how much water just moved into the area. So we are expecting this press conference. It was scheduled to begin at 10:30. We do know that the governor and the administrator Loeffler has been have arrived at the Alaska Airlines Center, but they are not quite ready to begin this press conference. So we will join them as soon as they have that. We see them start walking out. We will join them live, but we just wanted to give you an update that this is why we're here, and we do anticipate it starting, and they do tend to start very quickly. So I wanted to make sure that people were online and ready to watch when this begins. We will keep track of this, and hopefully in just a few minutes we will see the Governor Mike Dunleavy and the Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler coming out. As I said, they are here in Anchorage to assess the disaster recovery efforts and to talk about federal relief after the devastation that hit Western Alaska when that former typhoon Halong came through. So we will be keeping watch, and we'll join you back here as soon as we see them headed toward the lectern. If you are just joining us, we are planning to hear from Governor Mike Dunleavy and the Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler here in just a few minutes. I can show you the scene out at the Alaska Airlines Center. They are still waiting for the governor and the administrator to come out. But they are getting ready, and we are seeing a little bit of activity. We know that they have arrived at the Alaska Airlines Center. So we're hopeful that this will begin shortly. It was set to begin at 10:30, and so we're just waiting here for a few minutes to see when they will start heading out. And of course, we will take it live at that point. The governor tends to start these very quickly. He's a very fast walker. He walks out and begins speaking. So we will hopefully be able to bring you this in its entirety as soon as the governor and Administrator Loeffler head out. And once again, thank you for joining us. We are just waiting on the arrival of Governor Mike Dunleavy and Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler. The press conference was set to begin, excuse me, at 10:30. And as I said, the governor tends to make these happen very quickly once he arrives. And so we wanted to make sure that we were live and ready to go when the governor was as well. They've been moving this sign around. It actually fell over a little bit ago, so it looks like they are trying to get it back into place and get it stabilized there. So just wanted to keep you updated. We are still waiting for the governor and the Small Business Administration Administrator to come out for this press conference. They're over at the Alaska Airlines Center, which was, of course, was the first place that the evacuees were brought to when they were brought into Anchorage after being evacuated first out of their towns and then into Bethel and then into the Anchorage area. Thank you for joining us here. We are anticipating the beginning of a press conference here with Governor Mike Dunleavy and the Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler. They are in Anchorage to look, kind of assess the disaster relief operations and to talk about federal relief following, of course, Typhoon Halong's final impact here in Alaska as it moved through southwest Alaska. We can show you a little bit of that video. We have been talking about it. We've been covering this story since it began, and for weeks we've been seeing the devastation that hit western Alaska with the extremely high winds over Category 2 hurricane strength winds. It was not still a typhoon when it made it into the area of Alaska, into the Bering Sea. It had turned into a former typhoon at that point, but still obviously packed a punch and had very strong winds, pushing all that water along with high tide into a number of villages. In particular, Kipnuk and Quig are the two that have received the most, it appears to receive the most damage, but certainly not the only villages. Nightmute, we've seen some video from there, some pretty devastating damage to the homes and to the boardwalks in Nightmute, and Tuntatuliak also. So we've been seeing a lot of different images coming out of there, and we know that a lot of the people who were in those towns, you guys, have been transported to first Bethel, and some people coming into Anchorage, others have been able to stay with friends or family in nearby towns, and that's always good news. We are continuing to follow this story, talking about the different shelters here in the Anchorage area and what is happening with the people who have been living in those shelters. We will continue to follow that story today on Alaska's News Source. But right now we are just waiting for the governor and for the Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler to come out for this press conference. And we know that they have arrived at the Alaska Airlines Center. There is a live image of that, but just waiting. And so as soon as they begin to speak, we will, of course, bring this to you in full. We just anticipate it being soon. It was scheduled to begin at 10:30, which is why, of course, we went live. As I've said before, the governor's very quick. Normally his press conferences start on time, and if not a little early, and he walks in and starts speaking very rapidly, and I'm always afraid I'm going to miss the beginning of the conversation. So we are here anticipating this to go in just a few minutes. We see some people walking out, but none of them at this point look like Governor Dunleavy. So we will continue to walk out. They actually look like students. They're probably at the Alaska Airlines Center training, because it is still being used. Some of the facilities are still being used as gym facilities. We will bring this to you, as I said, live and in its entirety as soon as we see the governor head that way. From Alaska? So that is the live look from the Alaska Airlines Center as we wait for this press availability to begin. The notice that we got was that Governor Mike Dunleavy and Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler would be meeting with state emergency response officials, some of the survivors and evacuees, and some local leaders, and they are planning to come out and talk to the press with updates on the response. And of course, their focus will be on the federal assistance that is available for those affected by this. It was approved by Presidential Disaster Declaration, and we will continue to follow this story throughout the day. But our reporter, Will Courtney, is over there, and we'll hopefully hear from them in just a few minutes. Thank you for your patience. This was expected to begin at 10:30, so we're just waiting in anticipation. And just to let you know, we are still just waiting for this press conference. We are anticipating the governor to show up here in just a few minutes, and that is the intention and the hope as well. We expect Governor Mike Dunleavy and Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler to come out and speak to us. This was supposed to begin at 10:30, and the reason I keep just jumping on is so that as people join us, they don't think that it is over or that we have stopped broadcasting. We are continuing to broadcast, and we are continuing to monitor the scene. There's really nothing going on at this point in that area, and so we're kind of bouncing back and forth between that image of what's going on over at the Alaska Airlines Center, as well as, of course, our standby screen. So just kind of hang with us here for a second, and thank you so much for your patience. We are hopeful that this will start fairly soon, and we will bring you this press conference in its entirety when it does begin. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Tracy Sinclair with Alaska's News Source, and we are still waiting on this press conference to begin. It was announced that it would begin at 10:30, which is, of course, when we went live shortly thereafter, and they've still not out, so we will just continue to hang here, and we do anticipate Governor Mike Dunleavy and Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler to come out and speak to the press that is there. Of course, our crew is on scene as well. And the intent was that the governor and the Small Business Administration Administrator would be meeting with state emergency officials today, survivors, and local leaders as well. And of course, the main focus that they'll be talking about will be the federal disaster assistance. There was a presidential disaster declaration made last week, and so we will that will be the main focus of what they're talking about, how people can get help for the recovery efforts, and then we'll just continue hopefully to move forward from there. They are over at the Alaska Airlines Center, which is the first place that people who were evacuated from their homes in Western Alaska were brought to, after they moved into Bethel, and then they were brought to Anchorage, and they set up a shelter at the Alaska Airlines Center. And that is where they're at right now. That is where this press conference will take place, and we will continue to monitor the situation. If you've been on this listening for a little bit, you know that my experience is that the governor tends to begin these things very quickly once he does appear, and so that's why we're staying on this shot and staying pretty consistent, is because once he arrives, he begins to speak, and we don't want to miss what he is going to say. So thank you for your patience. Again, we are anticipating this press conference to begin hopefully soon. And of course, when we're talking about some of the damage that was done in Western Alaska with this storm, this is some of what we've seen from images and video of the people who this was their home, and how much damage this storm did, pushing in not only those high winds but also very high waters. Our team was able to actually get in a helicopter and fly over the area, so you can just see how much that water has inundated very far into lands where it isn't typically there. So it is just, water has just spread. Of course, we are getting very close to winter, and so the anticipation, the hope is that people can get some relief. Some people decided to stay in their villages. Most people in at least a couple of the villages, a number of the villages, have evacuated to the Anchorage area. First evacuated to Bethel, then a number evacuated all the way into Anchorage. We also do know that some people are staying with family and friends in other towns in Western Alaska. But you can see how these houses have just been pushed together. These buildings have been pushed together. In many cases, the school was the sanctuary. It's they typically are built higher up and have, it is the refuge. It is the place that people will go during a crisis, and so we do know that a number of places, that's where people were able to take shelter and take refuge from the storm. We're going to continue to follow this storm. We're also hopeful that we will see the arrival of one of our speakers here in just a few minutes. One of the images that struck me quite dramatically was the image of people sitting on those planes, on the C-17s, being evacuated out of Anchorage. Okay, and I did just get notification from our crew on the ground that we are about 5 minutes away, so that is good news. We know that we've had a lot of people that have been wanting to help, that have been dropping off physical items, new and used, and also financial support. Of course, you can always help by going to the Red Cross, and there is a specific area for Alaska's disasters and floods, and that's where you'll want to donate specifically to that. These are just some of the images that we saw throughout the last couple of weeks of people, again, being evacuated first from their homes into the Bethel area, and then from Bethel being put on planes. A lot of people being put into those C-17s, which are very large military planes, but still dramatic images. And it looks like we are just about ready to begin. Like I said, I am keeping watch on the monitor of our cameras, and I'm being told that the people that we're looking for are getting ready to come out of the doorway over at the Alaska Airlines Center. So for everybody that has hung with us, we do thank you for your patience. And we expect here in the next few minutes that this will actually begin. The press conference was set to begin at 10:30, which is why we have been on the air so long, trying to wait for this to begin, but we do anticipate that within the next few minutes we will hear from Governor Mike Dunleavy and, of course, the Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler. They have been in Anchorage meeting. The intention was that they were going to meet with state emergency response officials, also speak to some survivors and talk to local leaders. And the real focus, of course, this discussion will be federal assistance after that presidential disaster declaration that was made. So that will be the main point of the Small Business Administration Administrator's visit here, is to promote the federal disaster relief after, of course, Halong moved through Western Alaska in such a devastating manner. We're holding steady on this. As I said, I got a note from our crew here just a few minutes ago that it was about 5 minutes out. And so hopefully we are just a few minutes away from actually hearing from the governor and the Small Business Administration Administrator. It definitely does feel like we are getting closer, with more people coming out of the Alaska Airlines Center. They've been sort of congregating behind that door for the last couple of minutes. And I do believe there is Governor Mike Dunleavy. So it does look like we are getting ready to begin this press conference. And this, as I've said, will be with Governor Mike Dunleavy and Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler. They have been speaking about the emergency response, of course, to when the former typhoon Halong came into the western area of the state. Let's go ahead and bring up a little bit of. And here's Governor Mike Dunleavy.
You guys ready? Yes. Okay, because the administrator's on a tight schedule. But first of all, I just want to thank the administrator, Kelly Loeffler, SBA administrator, for the country for coming up. Last week I was in Washington, D.C. We were having conversations about the declaration, the disaster, and so forth. Her office was one of the first I went into to speak to her about, because oftentimes when we're thinking about FEMA, we're thinking about a whole host of organizations that have helped and will help, but sometimes there's other important organizations that deal with our businesses. And mentioned to her, we talked about the disaster, what the condition was, and I said, if you can get up to Alaska one of these days, that would be great. Next thing you know, she's here. So here we are on Wednesday. We spoke with her, I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday. Got on the plane and just came up here just for this, to learn more about what's happening on the ground, to talk to people, to understand Alaska a little bit better. And she'll be going back here this afternoon. But we're getting more and more people, as you see, into apartments, into places with their relatives. We're working very hard at getting the villages up and running. As we know, Kipnuk's it's tough shape, but we're working on that, as well as Quig. But this storm, once again, it was almost like Murbach in its scale and size, with a lot of concentration on those particular villages in terms of destruction. But anyway, you're going to see more response from the federal government. The president talks to us all the time, wanting to know how it's going up here. Even when he's in Asia, even when he's in Europe, he's focused on helping the people of this country, including Alaska. And so I'm going to turn this over to the administrator. And again, we're working hard. We're working hard with the federal government, all of our state agencies, the University of Alaska, all of the corporations, anyone that's associated with emergency response on this. And it's a lot of people from all over the country that's helping Alaska. So with that, Administrator.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you all for being here. This is incredibly important to talk about the relief efforts that are ongoing, and that's certainly why the SBA is here. I want to thank the Governor for his strong advocacy in Washington of this state. I've now had the pleasure of meeting him in Washington 3 times, so he's doing a fantastic job for this state, and certainly brought our attention to it. I think within a day of the governor leaving Washington, the president declared a presidential disaster for this state, committed to a minimum of $25 million. I know that probably will require much more, but that's part of what the SBA is here to do. We're not a response agency, we're a recovery agency. We've got our federal partners from FEMA here on the ground, and many tribal and nonprofit partners that I want to thank, Red Cross and Rubicon, for their hard work, their consistent work, and all the other partners that we just saw in this shelter here. Certainly the SBA has always been here for Alaska, putting out about $7 million in the last couple of fiscal years. This year, this disaster, the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, very large region, very complicated in terms of the response that's required, certainly unique from the lower 48, and as a result of that, we have modified some of the rules in order to speed relief to those survivors of this tragic disaster impacting a couple thousand people in the state. I'll give you an example of one of the things that we've done, which is to modify our loan approvals to allow for subsistence camps, which would allow funding and lending to take place for things like hunting, ATVs, preservation, food preservation devices, hunting knives, and other boats and other things needed for subsistence camps. And we're going to continue to respond to the unique needs of the terrain, of the people, of this culture, and make sure that the funding meets the moment. We're going to be here for the long term. The SBA, just so you know, you may have questions about why is the Small Business Administration involved in this, for 2 reasons. First of all, for residents and for small businesses. We provide long-term, low interest rate recovery loans for homeowners up to $500,000, and for businesses up to $2 million, and that's economic injury loans and physical business disaster loans. So this is one example of how the Trump administration is not leaving anyone behind, even amid the Senate Democrats' shutdown of the federal government. And it was important for me to be here. It was important for the president that the administration was here. And we're going to continue to advocate for relief of this crisis, this tragedy from Typhoon Halong, and make sure that we recover strong together. So, Governor, we want to take some questions, perhaps?
Yeah, where's our guys? Who's gonna ref it?
I'll ref it.
Okay.
All right, who's got a question? Let's go down here.
Yeah, Matt Hers with Northern Journal. There was a study that came out recently that talked about sort of the future that we expect for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, which is the area that was impacted here, and that the cost of sort of addressing the long-term threats to the villages in this region is going to be in the billions of dollars. And I guess I'd be curious to hear from both of you, sort of seeing that we've seen both Murbach and this storm probably costing in the range of hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, what is a reasonable long-term plan to see that kind of money come to that region to address the long-term threats that they face there?
Do you want me to go first?
You can start because you're.
That's a great question, right? That's one of the issues on the minds of folks is, we call it the 4 R's. There was rescue, there was relief, there's recovery, and then there's the question of potential relocation or resiliency. And that's a question that needs to happen because I agree that we have to take a look at a number of our communities. In Alaska, unlike other places, a lot of our communities are at sea level, literally. They're just a few feet above sea level. And with this storm surge that happened just recently with Halong and then Murbach before then, maybe we have to incorporate the fact that typhoons may be part of our emergency disaster mix, right? We have volcanoes, earthquakes, and so forth. It's a complex question to get the answers for not only what do you do to make a community prepared for the future, but where do you get the money and how do you do that? And that's not to say that it's so big we can't have that discussion. I think we need to, and we're already talking with some of the folks in the legislature and others. What do we look at there? I would say that obviously the focus right now is on recovery and relief, but as we're going out to those villages, we were supposed to go out tomorrow again and Friday to the affected areas because we're going to do the same thing we did with Murbach, and that's keep going out to see if things are recovering the way they're supposed to be with our agencies. But I do think that's a discussion, and my hope is always that we don't politicize the discussion to the extent let's use science on what the climate says, weather patterns say, but then again, what do you do with the village? Do you put it up on pilings? Do you move it to the nearest high ground? Do you have discussions with the people on consolidating? But I'll say this before I turn over to the administrator. This is really a discussion that has to have the people affected, the people in the villages, the tribes. In many cases out there, it's tribal government, not city government, but where there is city as well, and the organizations that represent them. We have to have a discussion with, in many cases, BIA in the Department of Interior on what we look at. So that's the big question. It's a complex question. I don't think it should be ignored. I think it's something that we need to take a look at, especially for those places that seem to be getting hit more and more with repeated storms and water.
Well, I think that was well said. I would just add that we have an opportunity to partner federal and state, and I think your state does a great job of it. Department of Interior was just here recently, so I think there's great appreciation for the needs of Alaska like never before. So I think it's really important that we keep this dialogue open about any changing needs on the ground and how we can support.
Let's go over here.
Governor Dunleavy, Will Courtney, Alaska's news source. Your office has previously committed to a 3-week deadline last week to have these villages able to be returned to in safe manner. The Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management said today that rivers are frozen, boat operations are no longer viable, critical infrastructure has failed in multiple communities, and there's power outages still in 5. Are you still sure that you're going to be able to commit to a 2-week deadline to have these villages in shape to be able to be returned to?
Well, again, the hope is to get them up and running as soon as possible. When you go in there and you take a look at the assessment, in some cases there's more damage than we may have previously thought. But we have, I don't know how many contractors we have on the ground right now, bringing in tons of gravel, bringing in supplies, working on electricity, working on sewer and water, working on honey bucket pits. I mean, we're moving as rapidly as we can. And as I mentioned earlier when I asked the question, my job is to make sure that it's happening by going out there periodically, every week, every other week, to see where things are at. Again, this is a huge area. Kotzebue and north was impacted all the way south, and almost to the Alaska Peninsula was impacted. Specifically, the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And so the commitment that I give to the people of Alaska, just like we've done in the previous 73 disasters we've had in Alaska with landslides and earthquakes, etc., is we're going to deploy every resource we have as quickly as possible. I'm very familiar with freeze up in rural Alaska, and it's happening now. But we're not going to stop just because there's ice, just because there's snow. We're going to keep going and working on it as long as we possibly can. I think we can get a lot of these villages up and running. I think we can get a lot of the homes and the infrastructure working. Kipnuk's in tough shape. Quig is right there as well. But I do think that I think people may be surprised in the end, and I hope they are, to what extent we were able to get things going. So the commitment is still there to get things up running as quickly as possible.
And then Quig also wants to relocate as well.
We got to have that discussion. We have to have that discussion.
We're going to do 2 more questions.
Who makes that decision? Who makes a decision on whether to relocate, rebuild, stay?
That is part. When I say it's part of the discussion, it's not a stiff arm to the question. These discussions don't happen every day. Moving entire villages, or how do you make it more resilient to these types of floods? So once we're well into and hopefully towards the end of recovery, which is getting these villages up, I think concurrently there needs to be a discussion, and it's got to start with the people in the villages, representative tribal and city governments, politicians here in Alaska, and of course discussions with our federal partners as well to see what is realistic, what can really happen in terms of how do we affect these villages going forward.
One more question, right here.
Hi, Administrator Loeffler. So among the small businesses that qualify, I believe, are village and regional native corporations. I know they get a lot of 8A contracting. I'm curious if for village corporations that are interested in getting sort of a disaster relief, is there going to be any different sort of process for them? Or can you just walk through how village and regional corporations will be able to take advantage of this relief?
Yeah, I'll answer at a high level. I'll turn it over to my Associate Administrator of Disaster Relief and Recovery. But let me just say that some of the things that we're doing here on the ground, we've modified so that people can be in person and not rely on a digital infrastructure right now, when so much of the infrastructure has been wiped out or is simply inaccessible. So we're sitting down person to person to make sure that they understand what they qualify for and what that relief would look like. I'll introduce you here to Chris Stallings, and he can talk a little bit about some of that experience and how we're modifying to work with local affiliations.
Absolutely. So our goal is to get these communities back as quick as possible. For us, as the administrator mentioned, we're changing the rules a little bit specifically to the communities that it impacted here. Alaska is different than any other state. Sometimes you could liken it to some of our more rural territories. So Puerto Rico disasters, where there's a lot of things, a lot of unique instances there. So we're taking lessons learned there, sitting down with each individual, as you mentioned, each of these entities, and saying, what are the needs that you have and how can we get to yes? That is a commitment that we're making, is the commitment to get to yes. Whatever that looks like, we'll take those back. The administrator has a lot of flexibility in this program because it's our program. We run this disaster recovery program. It's a government funded, but we're the rule maker because there are no underwriters, they're ours. It's our program all the way beginning to end. So we'll take every scenario and look at it individually, along with our state partners. Director Fisher will get their input on what needs to be put into play, and from there we'll work out each instance however we need to.
And then just a small follow-up, Administrator Loeffler. You mentioned the ongoing government shutdown. Can you talk a little bit about how and if the shutdown will affect how that relief goes out?
Well, first of all, it's a priority for President Trump that we address disasters in real time, and that's exactly what we've done thanks to the governor, his advocacy, and the president absolutely wanting to address this, and it will not have an impact under my watch or under President Trump's watch. So we're continuing with that work. We have about 24 staff on the ground today. We're going to be here for the long haul. We're going to make sure that the messaging gets out through traditional and alternative channels so that people understand the program. That's why I came up, is to make sure people understand there is relief, not just for small businesses, but for homeowners. We know so many homeowners have been impacted, and renters as well. And so we're going to continue to keep people updated on any changing dynamics on the ground, even amid weather changes, infrastructure challenges, technology challenges. I did want to add one thing that I failed to mention is I went by Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson this morning. I wanted to thank our military, who were so instrumental in airlifting up to 1,500 residents to safety. And that was the Alaska National Guard and the Coast Guard. And particularly amid a time of the shutdown, as you mentioned, sir, these are active duty military that are doing their jobs while the Senate Democrats are voting to not pay them for their work, their heroic work that is life-saving. So I want to thank them and make sure that they have the recognition for the hard work, the very selfless work that they did. And I'm grateful for the local volunteers, all the organizations represented here for the work that they're doing to care for these displaced Alaskans. That my prayers are with them, but our efforts will be behind that as well. So thank you all for coming out today. Governor, did you have any?
Just, I want to thank, again, the administrator coming out. We just met with her last week. And again, as you look at a disaster, it's FEMA, it's Homeland Security, certainly conversations with the president. We talked on the phone when I was back in D.C. We've been talking. Just last week when folks came here, I was texting him at 1 a.m, his time, about this disaster. Takes it seriously. And so I want to thank the administrator. I want to thank Doug Bergen with DOI, because there's a relationship between the tribes and Bureau of Indian Affairs that's going to continue as the discussions continue on this disaster. FEMA, Secretary Noem, and everyone else involved. The military did a fantastic job. The Coast Guard did a fantastic job. Our National Guard, our State Defense Force, our Naval Militia, everyone's pulling together in disasters, and that's what usually happens with America, especially here in Alaska. I would just say that we're going to continue to hit this real hard. This isn't a photo op. We're going to continue to go out there. I'm going to continue to go out there to see what the progress is or is not. We're going to be talking to people constantly. We're going to do the best job we can, and we'll continue to report out to you guys. We're going to continue to have meetings, but unfortunately, this may not be the last disaster we have. This is Alaska. Hopefully, we get a break for a while, but nonetheless, I want to thank the president and his staff. In a shutdown, he called me and he said, we're going to do everything we can to help the state of Alaska, tell the people in rural Alaska, tell the people in Alaska that that administration is there to help. So we'll keep you guys posted and updated on where things go. And on the question of relocation, that's going to be a discussion that's going to probably unfurl this winter or spring, and may take some time to really get resolution as to what that where that ends up going. But anyway, thank you for coming up.
The shutdown playing a role,
Thanks,
Governor?
guys.
What's that?
Is the shutdown still playing a role?
From my perspective, walked right into her office, walked right into Homeland Security. President Trump's on the phone, meetings with Secretary Bergen. Not from my perspective on the response to what's going on up here. We're all concerned about the shutdown because what's going to happen here on November 1st, et cetera, et cetera. But as was mentioned, if you think there's politics in Juneau, politics in Washington makes us look like one big happy family all the time here. So we just got to make sure those guys vote. All they have to do is vote in the Senate. The House already voted, and one party has to vote, and we can solve this issue here for several months at least. Anyway, thank you.
We run out of SNAP Saturday. 42 million people for SNAP.
Yeah.
So.
She's got to head out. She came up
Thank
just
y'all.
for this. She's going to go back to Washington, report out, and help Alaska. So thank you.
Thank you.
You guys have a location picked out?
And there you have it. This was Governor Mike Dunleavy and Small Business Administration Administrator Kelly Loeffler. I was just looking at some Halong video, and of course the Healing from Halong donation drive. So we basically, what they said is that the federal government is following along, that they are and hopefully, they are anticipating being able to help Alaskans, and that they are encouraging people to apply for that relief. We also heard the governor say that they are preparing for another trip out to Western Alaska to keep updated on the various conditions and how progress is going as they've begun bringing out gravel, as we've heard, into some of the villages. We are also hearing that the rivers are freezing up. And so winter is moving in quickly into Alaska. So we'll have to see how much recovery can be done before winter hits full force. We want to thank you so much again for your patience that this took a little bit of time to get going, but that was Governor Mike Dunleavy and Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler talking about the disaster relief here in Alaska. As you heard, Will Courtney was out there with our crew, so we will have more on this story as we follow it throughout the day. You can always find the latest by going to our free streaming platforms. You can find these on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. It is an easy app to download. Just search for either Add App or Add Channel and just search Alaska's News Source, and you will get not only live coverage of these sorts of events, but you can watch previous newscasts, find out the latest information on the weather. It's all there on our free streaming apps. Have a great day.